My stepkids told me I wasn't their real parent, so I stopped acting like one. Let's just say, they weren't ready for what happened next. Kindly hit that like button, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories just like this. Sarah Mitchell had always believed that love was a choice, not just a feeling. At 34, she had built a successful career as a marketing executive, climbing corporate ladders with the same determination she brought to everything in her life. But nothing had prepared her for the complex emotional landscape of becoming a stepmother. 3 years ago, when she said "I do" to David Mitchell in a small ceremony overlooking the Pacific Ocean, she wasn't just marrying the man she loved, she was embracing his entire world. That world included 2 children who had already experienced the devastating earthquake of their parents' divorce: 16-year-old Emma, with her defiant green eyes and sharp tongue that could cut glass when she felt cornered, and 13-year-old Tyler, whose quiet sensitivity masked a deep well of confusion about where he fit in this fractured family puzzle. David was everything Sarah had dreamed of in a partner: brilliant, compassionate, devastatingly handsome, with his salt and pepper hair and kind brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. As a cardiothoracic surgeon, he saved lives daily, but the demanding hours meant that the day-to-day reality of raising his children fell squarely on Sarah's shoulders when Jessica, their biological mother, made the difficult decision to relocate across the country for a prestigious job opportunity. "Are you sure about this?" David had asked her one evening as they sat in their kitchen, legal documents spread across the granite countertop like pieces of a complicated puzzle. "Full custody means, well, it means everything changes." Sarah had reached across the table, covering his weathered surgeon's hands with her own. "David, I love you. And I love Emma and Tyler. We're going to figure this out together." But love, Sarah was learning, was both simpler and infinitely more complicated than she had ever imagined. The first year had been a honeymoon period of sorts. Emma and Tyler, still reeling from their mother's departure, had clung to Sarah's warmth and stability. She threw herself into the role with characteristic determination, learning Emma's favorite coffee order from Starbucks, venti iced caramel macchiato with extra caramel, discovering Tyler's passion for vintage comic books, and slowly transforming their house into a home where laughter echoed through the halls. Sarah's days became a carefully orchestrated symphony of domestic life. She would wake at 5:30 a.m., prepare breakfast while mentally reviewing her work schedule, then begin the gentle but persistent process of getting 2 teenagers ready for school. Emma, perpetually running late and prone to dramatic wardrobe crises, required the diplomatic skills Sarah had honed in boardroom negotiations. Tyler, who would forget his own head if it wasn't attached, needed gentle reminders and backup supplies of everything from pencils to lunch money. "You're amazing," David would whisper to her in the early morning darkness as she slipped out of bed to start another day. "I don't know how you do it all." And for a long time, Sarah felt amazing. She felt needed, valued, like she was building something beautiful and meaningful. She attended parent-teacher conferences, cheered at Tyler's soccer games, and helped Emma navigate the treacherous waters of high school drama. She learned to decode teenage moods, to know when Emma's snapping meant she was overwhelmed with school stress and when Tyler's quietness signaled he was missing his mom. The grocery shopping alone had become an art form. Sarah memorized preferences and dietary restrictions, stocking the pantry with Tyler's beloved Lucky Charms and Emma's organic yogurt cups. She learned that Emma would only eat strawberry Pop-Tarts but Tyler preferred brown sugar cinnamon. She discovered that both kids would revolt if she tried to serve anything remotely healthy for dinner on Fridays, so she instituted Pizza Friday, a tradition that brought squeals of delight and made her feel like she was creating the kind of family memories that would last a lifetime. Their home became the gathering place for friends. Sarah's Wi-Fi password, Blended Family 2023, was coveted among the teenage social circle. Her streaming accounts, Netflix, Disney+, Hulu, and HBO Max, made their house the preferred hangout spot. She found herself driving not just Emma and Tyler everywhere, but often their friends too, her SUV becoming an unofficial taxi service for the local teenage population. Mrs. Mitchell, Emma's best friend Chloe, said one afternoon as Sarah dropped them off at the mall, "You're literally the coolest stepmom ever. My friend's stepmom is, like, such a witch." Sarah had glowed with pride, feeling like she was finally finding her place in this complex family dynamic. But as the months turned into years, subtle changes began to emerge. The gratitude that had once been freely offered became rare, replaced by an assumption that Sarah's contributions were simply expected. The enthusiastic thank yous for rides to friends' houses became grunted acknowledgements. The appreciation for favorite meals became complaints when dinner wasn't ready exactly when they wanted it. Sarah told herself this was normal. This was what happened in all families. The novelty wore off, and you settled into routines. This was what she had signed up for when she married David. This was real family life, messy and complicated and sometimes thankless. But deep in her heart, a small voice was beginning to whisper that something wasn't quite right. 2. The first real crack in Sarah's carefully constructed step-family facade appeared on a rainy Tuesday in October. She had been running late from work, traffic had been a nightmare, and she still needed to pick up Tyler from soccer practice, grab groceries for dinner, and help Emma with her college application essays. "Tyler, honey, we need to hurry," she called out as she pulled up to the school's athletic field, her phone buzzing with work emails that demanded immediate attention. Tyler jogged over to the car, his cleats clattering against the asphalt, his practice jersey soaked with sweat and rain. As he opened the car door, a wave of teenage boy mixed with wet grass and determination filled the vehicle. "Can we stop at GameStop?" he asked without preamble, not bothering with a greeting or acknowledgement of the fact that Sarah had rearranged her entire afternoon to accommodate his schedule. "Not today, buddy. I need to get groceries and Emma needs help with her essays. Maybe this weekend?" Tyler's face immediately shifted into the sullen expression that Sarah had learned to dread. "That's what you always say. You never do anything fun. You're just like a chauffeur or something." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. A chauffeur. Someone who provided a service but held no real relationship, no emotional connection. Someone who was paid to show up and perform a function. "Tyler, that's not fair." "Whatever," he mumbled, slouching in his seat and pulling out his phone, effectively ending the conversation. That evening, as Sarah stood in the kitchen preparing dinner, Tyler's favorite spaghetti and meatballs, made from scratch despite her exhaustion, she found herself replaying the interaction. She told herself he was just tired, just being a typical teenager. But the word chauffeur echoed in her mind like a stone dropped in still water, sending ripples of doubt through her confidence. The incidents began to accumulate like snowflakes before an avalanche. Emma, frustrated with her curfew, had snapped, "Jessica lets me stay out until midnight when I'm with her. You're so controlling." Tyler, when asked to clean his room, "This isn't even your house really. Dad owned it before you got here." Emma again, when Sarah suggested she might want to consider applying to state schools as well as private colleges, "You don't understand because you don't have kids of your own. This isn't really your business." Each comment was like a paper cut, small, seemingly insignificant, but cumulatively painful. Sarah began to notice how Emma and Tyler would immediately appeal to their father when she made any request or set any boundary, how they would reference their real mom whenever they wanted to avoid doing something Sarah asked. "David," she said one evening as they got ready for bed, "I feel like the kids don't see me as an authority figure. They constantly undermine me." David, exhausted from a 14-hour surgery day, rubbed his temples as he sat on the edge of their bed. "They're just adjusting, Sarah. Divorce is hard on kids. They're still figuring out where everyone fits. It's been 3 years, David. When does the adjustment period end? Can we talk about this tomorrow? I have surgery at 6 a.m. Tomorrow never came." David's schedule was relentless, and when he was home, he was either too tired for serious conversations or focused on being the fun dad, the parent who didn't have to enforce rules or set boundaries because he wasn't around enough to be the disciplinarian. Sarah found herself becoming increasingly isolated in her role. She was doing all the work of parenting, the grocery shopping, meal planning, homework supervision, chore enforcement, social calendar management, but receiving none of the respect or authority that typically came with that responsibility. The breaking point had been building for months, like pressure in a volcano. Sarah just didn't realize how close she was to an eruption. It started with small things that shouldn't have mattered but somehow did. Emma borrowing Sarah's expensive concealer without asking and using it all up. Tyler leaving his dirty dishes on the coffee table despite repeated requests to clean up after himself. Both kids treating the house like a hotel, expecting services without acknowledging the service provider. "Sarah, can you drive me to Chloe's house?" Emma would demand, not ask. "Sarah, I need new cleats by tomorrow," Tyler would announce, as if Sarah's ability to drop everything and accommodate his poor planning was simply a given. Never please. Never thank you. Never acknowledgement that Sarah had a life, a job, her own needs and priorities. The worst part was the way they would immediately switch tactics when they needed something beyond the basic services Sarah provided. Suddenly, when Emma wanted to go to an expensive concert or Tyler needed help with a complicated school project, she became Sarah again, not quite mom, but not quite the hired help either. "You're being too sensitive," David said when Sarah tried to explain her growing frustration. "They're kids. They don't mean anything by it." But Sarah was beginning to suspect that they meant everything by it. 3. November arrived with an unusual warmth for their Pacific Northwest city, as if nature itself was holding its breath before the inevitable storm. Sarah's work life was reaching a crescendo of year-end pressures, with client presentations, budget approvals, and strategic planning sessions consuming her days. She was functioning on a cocktail of caffeine, adrenaline, and sheer willpower, yet she never missed a school pickup, never failed to have dinner ready, never neglected the 1,000 small tasks that kept their family machinery running smoothly. But the appreciation deficit had reached critical levels. "Sarah." Emma's voice cut through the house like a fire alarm one Thursday evening. "Where's my blue sweater? The one with the pearl buttons?" Sarah looked up from her laptop, where she was trying to finish a presentation for the next morning while simultaneously monitoring Tyler's homework progress and keeping an eye on the chicken in the oven. "It's probably in the laundry room. I washed it yesterday." "Well, can you go get it? I need it for tomorrow." "Not could you please? Not when you have a chance." An expectation, delivered with the imperial tone of someone who had grown accustomed to having their needs prioritized above all else. "Emma, I'm in the middle of something. Can you please go get it yourself?" Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression already shifting into the martyred teenager look that Sarah had come to know so well. "Seriously? I have 3 tests tomorrow and I still need to finish my history essay. I don't have time to go digging through the laundry room. And I have a presentation at 8 a.m. tomorrow that could determine whether my team keeps our biggest client," Sarah replied evenly, not looking up from her screen. "We all have responsibilities, Em." "God, you're being such a—" Emma caught herself before finishing the sentence, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Such a what, Emma?" "Nothing. Forget it." Emma spun around and stalked toward the laundry room, her footsteps heavy with teenage indignation. 20 minutes later, Tyler wandered into the kitchen. "What's for dinner?" "I'm starving." Sarah gestured toward the oven. "Chicken and vegetables. It'll be ready in about 10 minutes. Tyler opened the refrigerator and peered inside with the eternal optimism of teenage boys everywhere. "Is there anything else?" "I don't really like vegetables." "Then eat around them. Can't you make mac and cheese instead? It's easier." Sarah finally looked up from her laptop, studying her stepson's face. At 13, Tyler was caught between childhood and adolescence, his features still soft but his attitude increasingly demanding. "Tyler, I've already started cooking dinner. The chicken has been in the oven for 40 minutes. So, you could make mac and cheese too." "I could. But I'm not going to." Tyler's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, confusion, and then the familiar sullen disappointment. "Fine. Whatever. I'll just eat cereal later." As Tyler slouched out of the kitchen, Sarah felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. She was saying no more often lately, not because she wanted to be difficult, but because she was simply reaching the limits of what one person could reasonably do. Yet every boundary she tried to establish was met with resistance, as if she was failing in her duties rather than asserting reasonable expectations. David arrived home at 8:30, long after dinner had been served, eaten, partially, in Tyler's case, and cleaned up. He looked exhausted, his scrubs wrinkled, his hair disheveled from the surgical cap. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing Sarah's cheek as she finished loading the dishwasher. "Fine," Sarah replied, though they both knew it was the kind of fine that meant anything but. The kids seemed pretty quiet when I came in. Emma thinks I'm being unreasonable because I wouldn't drop everything to fetch her sweater. Tyler thinks I'm mean because I wouldn't make him a separate dinner. David sighed, loosening his tie. They're just kids, Sarah. They don't understand how hard you work. When will they understand, David? When they're 30. You're tired. We're all tired. Maybe we should just order pizza tomorrow night. Give everyone a break. Sarah stared at her husband, this man she loved deeply but who seemed incapable of seeing the larger pattern that was emerging in their household. David, this isn't about pizza. This is about respect. This is about the fact that I've become the household manager, the chauffeur, the cook, the cleaner, and the homework supervisor, but I have zero authority to go along with all that responsibility. You have authority. No, I don't. Every time I set a boundary or make a request, they either ignore me or run to you to override me. And you? Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. You always choose the path of least resistance. David's face tightened. I'm trying to keep the peace. These kids have been through enough upheaval. What about my upheaval, David? What about the fact that I've completely reorganized my life around children who treat me like hired help? The conversation ended the way most of their conversations about the children ended, with David retreating to his study to decompress and Sarah feeling more alone than ever. That night, as she lay in bed listening to David's steady breathing beside her, Sarah found herself staring at the ceiling and wondering how she had gotten here. She thought about her friends from work, most of whom were single or married without children. They went to yoga classes after work, took weekend trips on a whim, made decisions based solely on their own preferences and needs. Sarah couldn't remember the last time she had made a decision based purely on what she wanted. She thought about her sister Jennifer, who lived across the country with her husband and 2 biological children. When Jennifer talked about parenting challenges, there was always an underlying assumption that she had the right to set rules, to expect respect, to be acknowledged as the authority figure in her home. Sarah had all the responsibilities of a parent but none of the inherent authority. She was expected to provide unconditional care and support, but her boundaries and expectations were constantly questioned and undermined. As she drifted toward sleep, one thought kept circling through her mind: something had to change. 4. The final straw came on a Friday evening in late November, when the early darkness of approaching winter seemed to mirror the shadows gathering in Sarah's heart. She had been looking forward to this particular evening all week. David was actually home for dinner, she had prepared everyone's favorite meal, and she had hoped they could have one of those Norman Rockwell family moments that seemed increasingly rare in their household. The dining room table was set with care, the good dishes, cloth napkins, candles flickering in the centerpiece Sarah had arranged with autumn leaves and small gourds. The kitchen smelled like home: roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and fresh rolls warming in the oven. She had even made Tyler's favorite chocolate chip cookies for dessert, though he probably wouldn't notice or acknowledge the gesture. Dinner, Sarah called, wiping her hands on her apron and feeling a flutter of hope in her chest. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight they could be the family she had envisioned when she first said yes to David's proposal. David appeared first, having changed out of his scrubs into jeans and a sweater that made him look more like the man she had fallen in love with and less like the overworked surgeon who collapsed into bed each night. "This looks amazing, honey," he said, squeezing her shoulder as he took his seat at the head of the table. Emma drifted in next, her face illuminated by her phone screen, thumbs moving in the rapid-fire texting pattern that had become her primary form of communication. She sat down without looking up, without acknowledging the effort that had gone into the meal, without seeming to notice that Sarah had remembered to make the green bean casserole exactly the way Emma liked it, with extra crispy onions on top. Tyler was last, sliding into his chair with the boneless grace of 13-year-old boys everywhere. He immediately reached for the bowl of mashed potatoes without waiting for anyone else to sit down, loading his plate with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't eaten in weeks rather than someone who had consumed a large after-school snack just 2 hours earlier. "Let's say grace," David suggested, a tradition that had emerged sporadically in their household, usually when he was feeling guilty about his long absences and wanted to create a moment of family connection. They joined hands around the table, Emma's reluctantly extended, Tyler's still holding his fork, and David offered a brief prayer of gratitude for family, food, and the blessings they shared. Sarah squeezed David's hand during the Amen, hoping to capture some of the warmth and connection she craved. For the first 10 minutes, everything seemed normal. David asked about school, Tyler launched into an animated description of a goal he had almost scored at soccer practice, and Emma actually looked up from her phone long enough to contribute a comment about her upcoming history test. Sarah felt herself relaxing, allowing hope to creep back into her heart. Then it happened. Could you help me clear some of these serving dishes? Sarah asked as the main course wound down. I want to bring out the cookies while they're still warm. Emma didn't look up from her phone. In a minute. Chloe's telling me about this drama at school. Emma, Sarah said more firmly, I could use your help now, please. Emma's head snapped up, her green eyes flashing with irritation. God, Sarah, I said in a minute. This is important. And I'm asking for help with dinner cleanup, which is also important. Tyler, Sarah turned to her stepson, could you please put your phone away and finish your vegetables before you have cookies? Tyler looked at her with the expression of someone who had been asked to perform an impossible task. I don't like green beans. They're gross. You don't have to like them, but you do need to eat them. I made this whole dinner, and I'm asking you to eat what's on your plate. That's when Emma's voice cut through the dining room like a blade. You can't tell us what to do. You're not our real mom. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion, sharp and acrid and impossible to take back. Sarah felt something inside her chest contract, as if all the air had been sucked from the room. Emma, David started, but Tyler interrupted him. Yeah. Our real mom never made us do chores. She never made us eat vegetables we didn't like. She was actually nice to us. Sarah sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, watching the two children she had loved and cared for 3 years tell her exactly where she stood in their hierarchy of importance. She waited for David to say something, to establish some boundaries, to remind his children that respect was non-negotiable in their household. Instead, David cleared his throat and said, let's all just calm down. Sarah, maybe we could let it go tonight? It's been a long week for everyone. Let it go. 3 simple words that told Sarah everything she needed to know about her place in this family. She wasn't worth defending. Her requests weren't worth enforcing. Her feelings weren't worth protecting. Sarah stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and with a few quick taps, changed the Wi-Fi password. The action was small, almost insignificant, but it felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. You're absolutely right, she said, her voice calm and clear. I'm not your biological mother. I'm just the woman who has been driving you to school every day, buying your groceries, cooking your meals, doing your laundry, helping with homework, and managing your social calendars for the past 3 years. Since you've made it clear that I have no authority over you, I'm going to stop pretending that I do. Emma's face went pale. What do you mean? Sarah smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. I mean that effective immediately, I'm revoking all non-biological parent privileges. David can handle school drop-offs and pickups since he's your actual parent. He can buy groceries for your specific preferences. He can cook your meals and do your laundry. Tyler's fork clattered to his plate. You can't do that. Actually, I can. See, here's the thing about authority, it comes with responsibility. If I don't have the authority to ask you to help clear the table or eat your vegetables, then I also don't have the responsibility to provide services that go above and beyond basic human decency. Sarah walked to the living room and began unplugging the gaming console and router. The Wi-Fi password has been changed. Since I'm not your parent, I don't need to provide internet access. David can set up his own network. Sarah, what are you doing? David asked, following her, his voice tight with confusion and growing panic. I'm calling Jessica and asking her to arrange pickup for the children within the hour, Sarah replied, pulling out her phone again. Since they've made it clear that they don't recognize my authority and prefer their biological parents, they should be with their biological parents. Emma shot up from the table. You can't send us to Mom. She's not even in the state. That's not my problem to solve anymore, Sarah said calmly. I'm just the woman who married your father. I'm not responsible for your living arrangements, your care, or your well-being. That's what you've been telling me, right? The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler's eyes were wide with shock, Emma's face had gone from pale to flushed, and David looked like he was watching his carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Sarah dialed Jessica's number, her heart pounding but her resolve stronger than it had been in years. Jessica. It's Sarah. I need you to make arrangements for Emma and Tyler. They'll need to be picked up tonight. Yes, tonight. Because they've made it clear that they don't accept my authority as a parental figure, so they need to be with someone whose authority they do accept. That's between you and David. Within the hour would be best. As Sarah hung up the phone, she looked at the three faces staring at her, two teenagers who suddenly looked much younger than their years, and one man who was finally beginning to understand the consequences of his inaction. I'll be in our bedroom, Sarah said quietly. When you've figured out the logistics, let me know. As she walked up the stairs, Sarah could hear frantic whispered conversations beginning behind her. For the first time in 3 years, those conversations didn't include her problem-solving, her compromising, her endless capacity to absorb disrespect in the name of family harmony. The silence in the bedroom felt like freedom. Sarah turned from the window to face her husband. David, did you hear what your children said to me tonight? They were upset. They told me I had no authority over them because I'm not their biological parent. They compared me unfavorably to their mother, dismissed my requests, and made it clear that they see me as hired help rather than a family member. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Sarah recognized as his way of processing stress. They're kids. Kids say things they don't mean when they're angry. And what did you do when they said those things, David? The question hung in the air between them. David's eyes darted away from hers, and Sarah knew he was reliving the moment, finally seeing it from her perspective. I tried to keep the peace. You told me to let it go. You prioritized their comfort over my dignity. Again. Sarah, I never meant. David, I have given everything to this family. Everything. I reorganized my entire life around your children. I put their needs first in every decision I made. I loved them like they were my own, and I asked for nothing in return except basic respect and recognition that I was part of this family. Sarah's voice remained calm, but David could see the pain that had been building behind her composed exterior. Instead, I got treated like a service provider. Someone who was expected to show up and perform functions but had no right to expect anything in return. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time Emma or Tyler thanked me for driving them somewhere? When was the last time they helped with household tasks without being asked multiple times? When was the last time they acknowledged that I have a life and needs outside of serving them? David was quiet, and Sarah knew he was searching his memory for examples that would prove her wrong. The fact that he couldn't find them immediately told her everything she needed to know. When was the last time you backed me up when I set a boundary? Sarah continued. When was the last time you made it clear to your children that disrespecting me was unacceptable? I didn't want to make things harder for them. They've been through so much. And what about what I've been through, David? What about the adjustment I've had to make? What about the sacrifices I've made? Another knock on the door interrupted them. Emma's voice, small and shaky, came through the wood. Sarah, can we please talk? Sarah looked at David, then walked to the door and opened it. Emma stood in the hallway, her face streaked with tears, looking younger than her 16 years. Tyler was behind her, his usual bravado completely gone. We're sorry, Emma whispered. We didn't mean what we said. Sarah studied their faces, seeing genuine remorse but also something else, fear. They were afraid of losing the stability and care that Sarah provided, but Sarah wondered if they were sorry for hurting her or just sorry for the consequences of their actions. What specifically are you sorry for? Sarah asked gently. Emma's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected to have to articulate her apology. For saying you weren't our real mom? And? Tyler stepped forward. For being mean about dinner? Sarah nodded slowly. Okay. And what do you think you did that hurt me the most? The teenagers exchanged glances, clearly struggling to understand the deeper issues at play. We don't listen to you. Emma offered tentatively. You've been treating me like I exist solely to serve you, Sarah said calmly. You expect me to drive you places, cook your food, buy your groceries, manage your schedules, and solve your problems, but you don't think I have the right to ask anything of you in return. You've made it clear that you see me as hired help, not as a family member. Tyler's face crumpled. We don't see you like that. Really? Then why do you never say please or thank you? Why do you complain every time I ask for help? Why do you immediately run to your father whenever I set a boundary? The silence stretched between them, broken only by Emma's quiet sniffling. We didn't think about it, Emma admitted finally. That's the problem, Sarah said gently. You didn't think about me at all. For 3 years, I've been thinking about you constantly, your needs, your preferences, your schedules, your happiness. But you've never once considered my needs or feelings. David cleared his throat. Sarah, maybe we could all sit down and… No, David. We've had 3 years to sit down and talk. We've had hundreds of conversations where I've tried to explain how I felt, and nothing changed. Tonight, your children made it clear that they don't see me as having any authority in this house, so I'm accepting that reality. Emma started crying harder. But we need you. Who's going to drive us to school? Who's going to make dinner? Sarah felt a stab of pain at the girl's words, but also a crystal clear understanding of the dynamic that had developed in their household. Emma, do you hear what you're saying? You're not upset about losing me as a person who loves you. You're upset about losing the services I provide. That's not true. Tyler protested, but his words lacked conviction. When was the last time you asked me how my day was? Sarah asked quietly. When was the last time you showed interest in my work, my friends, my life outside of this house? When was the last time you did something kind for me without being asked? The teenagers stared at her, and Sarah could see the realization dawning on their faces. They were beginning to understand the one-sided nature of their relationship with her. We can change, Emma whispered. We can be better. Sarah's heart ached at the desperation in the girl's voice, but she had heard similar promises before, usually in the aftermath of particularly egregious behavior. The changes never lasted more than a few days before old patterns reasserted themselves. I hope you can, Sarah said sincerely. But you're going to have to prove that to someone else. I'm done being the person who absorbs disrespect in the name of family harmony. The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted their conversation. Through the window, Sarah could see Jessica getting out of a Honda Civic, her expression grim as she approached the front door. Your mother's here, Sarah said gently. Go pack some clothes. As Emma and Tyler reluctantly headed to their rooms, David remained in the bedroom doorway, his face a mask of confusion and dawning realization. The house felt different after Emma and Tyler left with Jessica. The silence wasn't just the absence of teenage noise, it was the void left by the removal of the complex emotional dynamics that had defined Sarah's daily existence for 3 years. She found herself moving through rooms that suddenly felt too large, too quiet, too full of reminders of the life she had been living. David had tried to follow Jessica's car for the first few blocks, as if he could somehow undo the evening's events through sheer proximity to his children. When he returned an hour later, he found Sarah in the kitchen, methodically wrapping up the dinner that had gone cold and forgotten on the dining room table. They're staying at the Marriott downtown, he said quietly. Jessica wants to talk to them tonight and then drive back to Oregon tomorrow. Sarah continued wrapping the leftover chicken, her movements precise and controlled. Okay. Sarah, we nay. Sarah, I think I'm finally beginning to understand what you've been trying to tell me. Sarah nodded. I hope so, David. Because if we're going to have any chance of making this work, everything has to change. 5. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the chaos unfolding downstairs. Through the bedroom door, she could hear David's voice rising in panic as he made phone calls, Emma crying, and Tyler's confused questions about what was happening. The sounds of her family in crisis should have sent her running downstairs to fix everything, to smooth over the conflict, to sacrifice her own needs for the sake of peace. Instead, she felt a strange sense of calm settling over her like a warm blanket. Her phone buzzed with text messages, first from David, then from Emma, then even from Tyler, all of them suddenly very interested in communicating with the woman they had dismissed so casually an hour earlier. David, Sarah, please come downstairs. We need to talk about this. Emma, Sarah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, please don't make us leave. Tyler, can we talk please? I don't want to go to Mom's. Sarah turned off her phone and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood she had come to love. 3 years ago, she had driven through these streets for the first time as David's fiancée, imagining the life they would build together. She had pictured herself attending PTA meetings, hosting birthday parties, cheering at school events, being the kind of stepmother who seamlessly integrated into the existing family structure. What she hadn't anticipated was how exhausting it would be to love people who saw that love as an obligation rather than a gift. A soft knock on the bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah. David's voice was tentative, uncertain. Can I come in? It's your room too, David. He entered slowly, his face drawn with stress and confusion. Jessica is driving up from Oregon. She'll be here in about 4 hours. Sarah nodded. Good. Sarah, we need to fix this. The kids are devastated. Sarah placed the wrapped chicken in the refrigerator and turned to face her husband. Are they devastated because they hurt me, or because they're facing consequences for the first time in 3 years? David's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Isn't it? David, in all the chaos tonight, did either Emma or Tyler ever actually apologize for what they said to me? Or did they just apologize for the consequences they were facing? David was quiet for a long moment, clearly replaying the evening's events in his mind. They're scared, Sarah. They don't understand why you're reacting this way. They don't understand because you've never required them to understand. You've never required them to consider how their actions affect other people. Sarah sat down at the kitchen island, suddenly feeling exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. David, do you know what I realized tonight? I realized that I've been enabling this dynamic just as much as you have. What do you mean? I mean that every time they disrespected me, every time they treated me like hired help, every time they made it clear that my feelings didn't matter, I absorbed it. I told myself it was temporary, that they were adjusting, that love meant accepting poor treatment. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she continued. But what I was really doing was teaching them that it's okay to treat people badly as long as those people love you enough to tolerate it. David sat down across from her, his surgeon's hands clasped tightly on the granite countertop. So what do we do now? I don't know if there is a we anymore, David. The words hung between them like a bridge that had suddenly collapsed, leaving them stranded on opposite sides of a chasm that had been widening for months without either of them fully realizing it. You can't be serious, David whispered. I've been thinking about this for weeks, maybe months. Tonight just crystallized everything I'd been feeling. Sarah looked at her husband, this man she had loved enough to completely reshape her life for, and felt a profound sadness settle over her. David, you have 2 children who desperately need boundaries, structure, and consequences. They need to learn that relationships are built on mutual respect, not one-sided service. They can learn. Not with me. I've been the buffer for too long. I've absorbed all the negative behavior while you got to be the fun parent who swept in occasionally to save the day. Your children don't respect me because you've never required them to respect me. David's face was stricken. Sarah, I love you. The kids love you too, in their own way. Love without respect isn't love, David. It's exploitation. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Sarah found herself thinking about the woman she had been 3 years ago, confident, independent, clear about her own worth. Somewhere along the way, she had lost that woman in the maze of trying to be what everyone else needed her to be. If I stay, Sarah said finally, what changes? David's eyes brightened with hope. Everything. I'll talk to the kids, set clear expectations. No, David. What changes with you? The question caught him off guard. With me. You're the common denominator in all of this. Emma and Tyler learned that disrespecting me was acceptable because you never made it unacceptable. They learned that my boundaries were optional because you never enforced them. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood that had become a symbol of dreams deferred and expectations unmet. If we're going to have any chance of saving this marriage, you need to fundamentally change how you parent your children. Not just set rules, but actually enforce them. Not just talk about respect, but require it. I can do that. Sarah turned back to face him. Can you? Even when it means being the bad guy? Even when it means your children are angry with you instead of with me? Even when it means you can't be the fun parent anymore because you have to be the responsible one? David was quiet, and Sarah could see him grappling with the implications of what she was asking. They're going to need therapy, Sarah continued. Individual therapy and family therapy. They need to understand that their parents' divorce doesn't give them the right to treat other people poorly. Okay. And you're going to need therapy too. You need to figure out why you'd rather sacrifice your wife's dignity than deal with your children's displeasure. David flinched, but nodded. And if Emma and Tyler come back, they come back with the understanding that I am an equal authority figure in this house. Not a service provider, not a friend they can dismiss when convenient, but a parent figure who deserves the same respect they give you. And if they can't do that? Sarah met his eyes steadily. Then they can't live here. And neither can I. The ultimatum settled between them like a stone dropped into still water. David stared at his wife, this woman he had taken for granted, and began to understand the magnitude of what he was facing. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, his face growing more troubled. It's Jessica. She wants to meet with both of us tomorrow morning to discuss the situation. Sarah nodded. Good. It's time everyone understood that this isn't just about tonight's dinner. This is about 3 years of dysfunction that nobody wanted to address. 7. The next morning, Sarah woke before dawn, her body automatically responding to 3 years of early morning family schedules even though there were no children to get ready for school. She lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to David's breathing and trying to process the strange lightness she felt. For the first time in years, she had nothing pressing to do. No lunches to pack, no backpacks to check, no teenagers to cajole out of bed. The freedom felt foreign and wonderful and slightly terrifying all at once. She made coffee in the quiet kitchen, noticing how different the space felt without the constant background noise of teenage life. No one was going to wander in asking what was for breakfast while simultaneously complaining that they didn't like any of the available options. No one was going to leave dirty dishes on the counter while walking past the dishwasher. No one was going to use the last of the milk and put the empty carton back in the refrigerator. The silence was peaceful in a way Sarah hadn't experienced in her own home for 3 years. David appeared at 7:30, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual scrubs. He had called in sick for the first time in years, claiming a family emergency. How did you sleep? He asked, pouring himself coffee and sitting across from her at the kitchen island. Better than I have in months, Sarah admitted. How about you? Terribly. I kept thinking about what you said last night. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both of them processing the dramatic shift their family had undergone in less than 24 hours. Sarah, I think I owe you an apology. Sarah looked up from her coffee cup, surprised by the formal tone in David's voice. I've been thinking all night about the last 3 years, trying to see them from your perspective. David's voice was steady but heavy with emotion. You're right. I did make you the buffer. I let you absorb all the difficult aspects of parenting while I got to sweep in and be the hero when it was convenient. Sarah waited, sensing there was more. I told myself I was protecting the kids from more upheaval, but really I was protecting myself from having to be the bad guy. It was easier to let you enforce rules and set boundaries because if they got angry at you instead of me. The admission hung between them, honest and painful. And when they disrespected you, I didn't defend you because I didn't want to deal with their anger or resentment. I chose the easy path every single time, and I let you pay the price for it. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of relief at finally being seen and understood. David, thank you for saying that. I'm ashamed that it took you removing yourself from the situation for me to see it clearly. At 10 a.m., they drove to the Marriott to meet Jessica. Sarah hadn't seen David's ex-wife in over a year, and she was struck by how much Jessica looked like an older version of Emma, the same green eyes, the same stubborn set to her jaw, the same way of holding herself that suggested she was ready for a fight. They met in the hotel restaurant, a neutral space that felt appropriate for the difficult conversation ahead. Emma and Tyler were notably absent. "I left the kids in the room," Jessica said without preamble. "I thought we should talk first." Jessica ordered coffee and studied Sarah with an expression that was hard to read. "So, you kicked my children out of their home." Sarah felt David tense beside her, but she kept her voice calm and steady. "I removed myself from a situation where I was being disrespected and my authority was being undermined." "They're children, Sarah. Children say things they don't mean when they're upset." "Jessica, with respect, Emma is 16 and Tyler is 13. They're old enough to understand that actions have consequences." Jessica's eyes flashed. "So your consequence was to traumatize them by threatening abandonment?" Sarah felt a familiar surge of frustration, the same feeling she had experienced countless times when trying to set boundaries with Emma and Tyler. The immediate deflection, the refusal to acknowledge the behavior that had prompted the consequence, the focus on Sarah's response rather than the children's actions. "Let me ask you something," Sarah said. "What did Emma and Tyler tell you about what happened last night?" Jessica's expression shifted slightly. "They said you got angry about them not helping with dinner and overreacted." "And what else?" That's what they told me." Sarah nodded, understanding now why the children felt so comfortable dismissing her authority. They had learned to present selective versions of events that painted them as victims rather than participants in dysfunction. "Jessica, your children told me I had no authority over them because I wasn't their biological parent. They compared me unfavorably to you and made it clear that they saw me as hired help rather than a family member. When I asked David to address their behavior, he told me to let it go." Jessica was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. "They didn't mention that part." "Of course they didn't. Just like they probably didn't mention that I've been driving them to school every day, cooking their meals, doing their laundry, helping with homework, and managing their social calendars for 3 years without so much as a thank you." David cleared his throat. "Jessica, I think we need to be honest about what's been happening. Sarah has been doing the majority of day-to-day parenting, but the kids have never respected her authority because I never required them to." Jessica looked between Sarah and David, her expression growing more troubled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that our children have learned that they can treat Sarah poorly without consequences. They've learned that her boundaries are optional and her feelings don't matter. And I've realized," Sarah added, "that I've been enabling this dynamic by absorbing their disrespect instead of requiring them to change." Jessica was quiet for a long time, stirring her coffee absently. Finally, she looked up at Sarah. "What do you want to happen now?" "I want Emma and Tyler to understand that relationships require mutual respect. I want them to learn that they can't treat people poorly just because those people love them. And if they can't learn that," Sarah's voice was steady but firm, "then they can't live in my house." The words hit Jessica like a physical blow. "You're giving me an ultimatum about my own children." "No," David said quietly. "We're giving you information about what needs to happen for our family to function." Jessica stared at David, clearly shocked by his support of Sarah's position. "David, these are your children." "Yes, they are. And they're going to be damaged adults if we don't teach them how to treat people with respect and kindness." The conversation continued for another hour, with Jessica alternating between defending her children and gradually acknowledging the patterns of behavior that Sarah and David described. It became clear that Emma and Tyler had been presenting very different versions of their home life to their mother, painting Sarah as an unreasonable taskmaster rather than someone who had been bending over backward to accommodate them. "I need to talk to them," Jessica said finally. "Really talk to them. Not just listen to their side of the story, but help them understand how their behavior has affected you." Sarah nodded. "They're good kids, Jessica. But they've learned some really unhealthy patterns that are going to hurt them in every relationship they have if we don't address them now. What would you need to see from them to consider letting them come home?" Sarah had been thinking about this question all night. "I would need to see genuine remorse, not just sorry they got caught or sorry they're facing consequences, but actual understanding of how their behavior affected me. I would need to see them take responsibility for their actions without making excuses. And then we would all need to go to family therapy. This isn't something that can be fixed with an apology and a promise to do better. We need to rebuild our relationship from the ground up, with clear expectations and consistent consequences. Jessica looked at David. And you're committed to supporting this? David nodded firmly. Sarah has given our family everything she had to give. It's time for the rest of us to step up. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Jessica turned to Sarah one more time. I owe you an apology too. I've been so focused on making sure the divorce didn't hurt the kids that I didn't pay attention to how they were treating you. They told me you were strict and demanding, but I never asked what you were demanding or why. Sarah felt a surprising surge of compassion for this woman who was also trying to navigate the complex dynamics of a blended family. Jessica, we all want what's best for Emma and Tyler. But what's best for them is learning how to be respectful, considerate people. I know that. I didn't want them to feel like they had lost another parent. They haven't lost me, Sarah said gently. But they need to understand that love doesn't mean accepting poor treatment. If anything, love means caring enough about someone to help them become their best self. 8. 3 days passed in unusual quiet. Sarah went to work, came home, made dinner for 2 instead of 4, and experienced the strange pleasure of having adult conversations with David without the constant interruption of teenage drama. They talked more in those 3 days than they had in the previous 3 months, processing years of accumulated resentment and misunderstanding. David, freed from his role as mediator between Sarah and the children, began to see their family dynamics with startling clarity. He started telling Sarah about memories that took on new meaning in light of recent revelations, times when Emma had complained about Sarah's rules, times when Tyler had run to him to override Sarah's decisions, times when he had chosen the path of least resistance instead of supporting his wife. I think I was afraid, David admitted on the 3rd evening as they sat together on their couch, a luxury they rarely enjoyed during the teenage years. Afraid that if I was too strict or too demanding, they would want to live with Jessica full-time. And instead, your fear of losing them almost cost you me. David nodded, his arm tightening around Sarah's shoulders. I'm ashamed of how long it took me to understand that. On Thursday evening, David's phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, and both David and Sarah felt their stomachs tighten with anticipation. Hi, Jessica, David answered, putting the phone on speaker so Sarah could hear. David, I've had some very difficult conversations with Emma and Tyler over the past few days. There was a long pause, filled with the weight of whatever revelations had occurred. They finally told me the truth about how they've been treating Sarah. All of it. Not just the dinner incident, but everything. The way they've been talking to her, the way they've been treating her requests, the way they've been discussing her when she wasn't around. Sarah felt her chest tighten, both dreading and needing to know what the children had said about her in private. Jessica, what did they tell you? David asked. Things that made me realize my children have been learning some very toxic patterns. They told me they thought it was funny when Sarah got frustrated. They admitted they would deliberately ignore her requests because they knew she couldn't really punish them. They said they thought she was trying too hard to be their mom and they wanted to put her in her place. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. The casual cruelty, the deliberate nature of their disrespect, the calculated way they had undermined her for their own amusement. But here's what I think is most important, Jessica continued. When I really pressed them about it, when I made them think about how they would feel if someone treated them that way, they broke down. Emma especially. She said she knew she was being mean but she didn't know how to stop. David and Sarah exchanged glances. This was the first indication that the children had any real awareness of the impact of their behavior. They want to come home, Jessica continued. But more than that, they want to make things right with Sarah. Really right, not just apologize and go back to old patterns. What does that look like? Sarah asked, speaking for the first time during the call. Emma has written you a letter. A real letter, not a text message. She spent 2 days on it. And Tyler asked me to tell you something specific. Sarah waited, her heart pounding. He said to tell you that he remembers every soccer game you came to, every time you made his favorite cookies, every night you helped him with math homework even when you were tired from work. He said he wants you to know that he noticed, even when he didn't say thank you. Sarah felt tears beginning to fall. These weren't the words of children who saw her as hired help. These were the words of children who had been loved and who had loved in return, but who had never learned how to express that love appropriately. Jessica, what are you thinking in terms of next steps? David asked. I think they're ready to come home, but only if Sarah is willing to have them back. And only with the understanding that everything changes. Sarah took a deep breath. I'd like to read Emma's letter first. And I'd like to meet with both of them before they come back to the house. Of course. And Jessica, thank you for listening to what I was really saying, and for having those difficult conversations with them. Sarah, I owe you an enormous apology. I've been so focused on protecting my children from the consequences of the divorce that I forgot to teach them how to treat people with kindness and respect. You've been more of a parent to them than I have in some ways, and they've repaid that by treating you terribly. After they hung up, Sarah and David sat in silence for several minutes, processing the conversation. How do you feel? David asked finally. Scared, Sarah admitted. Hopeful, but scared. What if they come back and nothing really changes? What if this is just a temporary improvement because they want to come home? Then we stick to the boundaries we've set. But Sarah, what Tyler said about remembering, that gives me hope that the foundation is there. Maybe they just never learned how to build on it properly. The next morning, Jessica brought Emma's letter to Sarah's office. Sarah had asked to read it privately, without the pressure of immediate response or the complexity of family dynamics influencing her reaction. She sat in her office with the door closed, holding the 3 pages of carefully written text, and began to read. Dear Sarah, I don't even know how to start this letter because I don't think there are words big enough for how sorry I am. Not just sorry that I got in trouble, but sorry for how I've been treating you for 3 years. Mom made me sit down and really think about everything I've said and done to you, and I'm so ashamed I can barely stand it. She made me imagine if someone treated me the way I've treated you, and I would hate that person. I would think they were cruel and selfish and awful. And that's what I've been to you. I know you probably think I don't appreciate anything you've done for me, but that's not true. I remember every single thing. I remember when I had the flu in 9th grade and you sat up with me all night, bringing me soup and ginger ale and watching movies with me even though you had a big presentation the next day. I remember when I was crying about the drama with Chloe and Madison, and you listened for 2 hours and helped me figure out what to do. I remember when you helped me pick out my dress for homecoming and told me I was beautiful even though I was being bratty about everything. I remember all of it. Every ride to school when it was raining. Every time you made my favorite dinner. Every time you washed my clothes without me even asking. Every time you helped me with homework. Every time you let my friends come over and hang out. Every time you made sure I had everything I needed. But I never said thank you. Not really. And worse than that, I was mean to you. I said horrible things and I acted like you were bothering me when you were just trying to take care of me. I acted like you were trying too hard instead of appreciating that you were trying at all. The truth is, I was scared of loving you because I thought it would be betraying Mom. And I was angry that I needed you because I wanted to pretend I didn't need anyone. But mostly, I think I was just being a selfish, immature brat who took your kindness for granted. I know that just saying sorry isn't enough. I know I have to show you that I mean it. If you'll let me come home, I promise I will be different. Not just better, but actually different. I will treat you with the respect and appreciation you deserve. I will help around the house without being asked. I will say please and thank you. I will think about your feelings before I say things. I will go to therapy and do whatever work I need to do to become the kind of person who deserves to have someone like you in their life. I know you might not want me to come back, and I would understand that. But I hope you'll give me a chance to show you that I can be better. I hope you'll let me prove that I'm worthy of all the love you've given me. I love you, Sarah. I should have said it before, but I was too proud and too scared. But I love you and I'm grateful for you and I want to be the kind of daughter you can be proud of. Love, Emma. P.S. Tyler wanted me to tell you that he's writing you a letter too, but he's not as good at writing as I am, so it's taking him longer. But he wanted you to know that he's really, really sorry too. Sarah sat at her desk, tears streaming down her face, feeling as though something that had been broken inside her chest was slowly beginning to heal. This wasn't the grudging apology of a child trying to avoid consequences. This was the heartfelt recognition of a young person who was beginning to understand the impact of her actions on someone she loved. For the first time in days, Sarah felt genuine hope that their family could be rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect and appreciation. She picked up her phone and texted Jessica, "Tell Emma I'd like to meet with both kids tonight. Tell her I read her letter and I'm proud of her for writing it." 9. That evening, Sarah and David met Emma and Tyler at a quiet restaurant downtown, neutral territory that felt less charged than either their home or the hotel where the children had been staying. Sarah had chosen the location carefully, public enough to keep emotions in check, but private enough for honest conversation. Emma looked older than she had just 5 days earlier, as if the events of the week had forced her to mature in ways that birthday parties and driver's licenses never could. Tyler seemed smaller somehow, less of the cocky teenager and more of the uncertain boy he still was underneath all the bravado. They ordered drinks and appetizers, the normal rituals of family dining feeling both familiar and strange after the rupture they had all experienced. "Emma, I read your letter," Sarah said once they were settled. "Thank you for being so honest with me." Emma's eyes immediately filled with tears. Do you think you can forgive me?" Sarah reached across the table and took Emma's hand. "Honey, I forgave you before you even wrote the letter. What I need to know is whether you really understand what needs to change going forward." Tyler cleared his throat. "Sarah, I'm not good at writing like Emma is, but I wanted to tell you something." Sarah turned her attention to him, noting the way his voice was higher than usual, the way his hands were fidgeting with his napkin. "I've been thinking about what Mom said, about how we treated you. And I realized that I never really thought about you as a real person. Like, I knew you were a person, but I thought about you as someone who was just there to take care of us." Tyler's honesty was startling in its simplicity. "I never thought about you having bad days at work, or being tired, or wanting things for yourself. I just thought about what I wanted and expected you to help me get it." Sarah nodded, appreciating his insight. "Tyler, what do you think that felt like for me?" "Probably really lonely," he said quietly. "And probably really frustrating. Like, if someone only talked to me when they wanted something from me, I would feel like they didn't really care about me as a person." "That's exactly right." Emma jumped in. "And we never asked you about your life. Like, I know you have a job and friends and hobbies, but I never asked you about any of it. I never asked if you were happy or stressed or excited about anything. I never even knew what kind of music you like," Tyler added, looking ashamed. "You know all our favorite songs, but we never asked about yours." Sarah felt a flutter of hope at these observations. They weren't just acknowledging the surface behaviors that had been problematic, they were beginning to understand the deeper relational dynamics that needed to change. "So what would it look like if things were different?" Sarah asked. Emma and Tyler exchanged glances, clearly having discussed this during their time with their mother. "We wrote down some ideas," Emma said, pulling a piece of paper from her purse. "Mom helped us think about it." She unfolded the paper and began reading. "First, we want to start having real conversations with you. Not just asking for things, but asking about your day and your work and what you're interested in." Tyler took over. "Second, we want to help around the house without being asked. Like, actually help, not just do things grudgingly when you nag us about it." Third, Emma continued, "we want to say please and thank you. Not just sometimes, but all the time. Because everything you do for us is a choice, not something you owe us. Fourth, we want to include you in decisions about our lives instead of just expecting you to go along with whatever we decide." Sarah listened, impressed by the thought they had clearly put into this list. "And fifth," Emma's voice grew softer, "we want you to know that we see you as our family. Not our biological mom, but our family. And we want to treat you like the important person you are in our lives." Tyler nodded emphatically. "We want you to come home, Sarah. But more than that, we want to deserve to have you come home." David, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, cleared his throat. "I want to say something too." He turned to his children. "Emma, Tyler, I owe you both an apology. As well. I've been a coward as a father. I let Sarah handle all the difficult parts of parenting while I got to be the fun dad. And when you disrespected her, I didn't defend her because I didn't want to deal with your anger." The teenagers looked surprised by their father's admission. "That's going to change. Sarah and I are partners in this family, and that means her authority is equal to mine. It means that disrespecting her is the same as disrespecting me. And it means that I'm going to start being a real parent instead of just the guy who shows up for the fun stuff." Emma reached for Sarah's other hand. "Sarah, will you come home? Will you give us another chance?" Sarah looked around the table at these three people she loved so much, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in years. David, finally ready to step up as a full partner in parenting. Emma, beginning to understand the complexity of human relationships. Tyler, starting to see beyond his own immediate wants and needs. "I'll come home," Sarah said quietly. "But I need you all to understand that this isn't just about going back to the way things were. We're building something new." Tyler grinned, looking more like the little boy he had been when Sarah first met him. "Can we start tonight?" Sarah laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "We can start tonight." As they drove home together, all four of them in David's car, like a family, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic about the future. She knew there would be setbacks, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt like they were all on the same team. 10. The first week back together was a revelation in small moments. Emma, unprompted, brought Sarah a cup of coffee on Tuesday morning and asked about her presentation at work. Tyler helped load the dishwasher after dinner without being asked, then lingered in the kitchen to tell Sarah about a funny story from soccer practice. David backed up Sarah's request that Emma clean her room before going out with friends, and when Emma started to argue, he calmly reminded her that respecting Sarah was non-negotiable. But it was the bigger moments that really showed the depth of change occurring in their family. On Friday evening, Sarah was running late from work and texted the family that she wouldn't be home until after 7 p.m. When she walked through the door, exhausted and apologetic, she found that David had picked up takeout, Emma had set the table, and Tyler had started a load of laundry. "We thought you might be tired," Emma explained, taking Sarah's purse and work bag. "So we handled dinner." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you. All of you." "Sarah," Tyler said, his voice uncertain, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy? Are you happy to be back home with us?" The question was so earnest, so vulnerable, that Sarah's heart ached with love for this boy who was learning to consider other people's feelings. "Yes, Tyler. I'm very happy to be home with you." The second week brought their first real test. Emma asked to go to a party at a friend's house, and Sarah said no because she knew the friend's parents would be out of town. "But Mom would let me go," Emma started to say, then caught herself. "I'm sorry. That was wrong of me to say." "Thank you for catching yourself," Sarah said. "Do you want to talk about why I said no?" Emma sighed but sat down at the kitchen counter instead of storming off to her room. "Because you're worried about us drinking or something bad happening without adults there. That's part of it. What else?" Emma thought for a moment. "Because you care about me and you want me to be safe." "Exactly. Emma, when I say no to something you want to do, it's not because I don't want you to have fun. It's because I love you enough to protect you even when it makes me the bad guy." Emma nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand that." The third week brought an unexpected challenge. Tyler came home from school in tears, having been suspended for getting into a fight with a classmate who had been bullying a younger student. In the past, Sarah would have been the one to handle the crisis while David worked late. Tyler would have been sullen and defensive, Emma would have used the drama as an excuse to avoid her own responsibilities, and David would have swept in later to dispense wisdom without having dealt with the messy emotional work. This time was different. David left work early to join the family meeting. Tyler, still upset but no longer defensive, explained what had happened and why he had chosen to fight rather than get a teacher. Emma offered to help Tyler with the extra homework he would miss while suspended. Tyler, I'm proud of you for defending someone who was being bullied, Sarah said. But I'm concerned about the choice you made about how to handle it. I know fighting was wrong, Tyler said. But I was so angry, and he was being so mean to Marcus. What else could you have done? David asked. Tyler thought for a moment. I could have gotten a teacher. Or I could have told Marcus to walk away with me. Those are both good options, Sarah said. What held you back from choosing one of them? I wanted to make him stop right then. I didn't want Marcus to think I was a coward. Emma leaned forward. Tyler, do you think Marcus thinks you're a coward now? Tyler's face brightened slightly. Actually, no. He thanked me. But he also said he wished I hadn't gotten in trouble. So he appreciated your intention even though he didn't need you to fight for him? Sarah asked. Yeah. That's good information for next time, isn't it? Tyler nodded. I think I understand better now. What struck Sarah most about this conversation was how natural it felt. They were functioning as a family unit, with everyone contributing to problem-solving rather than falling into the old patterns of blame and avoidance. By the 4th week, Sarah realized that something fundamental had shifted in their household dynamic. The children were initiating conversations about their days, asking about hers, offering to help without being asked, and treating her requests as legitimate rather than burdensome. More importantly, David had stepped fully into his role as an equal parenting partner. He was handling discipline, making decisions about the children's activities, and most importantly, consistently backing up Sarah's authority. I feel like I'm getting to know you for the first time, Emma said one evening as she and Sarah prepared dinner together. What do you mean? Before, I only thought about you in terms of what you could do for me. Like, Sarah the driver, Sarah the cook, Sarah the homework helper. But now I'm starting to see you as Sarah the person who loves art museums and terrible reality TV shows and gets excited about new marketing campaigns at work. Sarah smiled, touched by Emma's observation. I love that you're noticing those things about me. It makes me like you more. Not just appreciate what you do, but actually like who you are as a person. Tyler, who had been setting the table, chimed in. Sarah, can I tell you something weird? Sure. I used to think you were trying too hard to be our mom. But now I realize you weren't trying to be our mom. You were just trying to love us the way you love people. Sarah paused in her chopping, struck by the wisdom in Tyler's observation. That's exactly right, Tyler. I was never trying to replace your mom or make you love me more than you love her. I was just trying to love you the way I love people I care about. And we made that really hard for you, Emma added quietly. You did, Sarah agreed. But you were also learning. We were all learning. 11. Dr. Martinez had kind eyes and a calm presence that immediately put the family at ease during their first session together. Sarah had researched family therapists extensively, looking for someone who specialized in blended families and understood the unique challenges they faced. So, Dr. Martinez said, settling into her chair across from the 4 of them, tell me what brought you here. The story came out in pieces: Sarah's growing frustration, the children's disrespect, David's avoidance, the explosive dinner that had changed everything. But as they talked, Sarah realized they weren't just recounting what had happened. They were examining it, understanding it in ways they hadn't been able to when they were living through it. Emma, what do you think you learned about yourself during this experience? Dr. Martinez asked. Emma was quiet for a long moment. I learned that I was really scared. Scared of what? Scared of loving Sarah because I thought it meant I was betraying my mom. And scared of Sarah leaving because then I would lose another parent. So you pushed her away before she could leave? Yeah. Which is really stupid because pushing her away almost made her leave anyway. Dr. Martinez nodded. That's a very human response to fear, Emma. It's not stupid, but it wasn't serving you well. Tyler raised his hand tentatively, like he was in school. Can I say something? Of course. I think I was angry about the divorce, and I took it out on Sarah because she was safe to be angry at. What do you mean by safe? Tyler looked at his father. I mean, I couldn't be angry at Dad because I was scared he would leave too. And I couldn't be angry at Mom because she was already far away. But Sarah was always there, and I knew she would still be there even if I was mean to her. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Tyler, that must have been really confusing and painful for you. It was. But it wasn't fair to you. Dr. Martinez turned to David. What about you? What did you learn about yourself? David shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the focus on him. I learned that I'm conflict avoidant to a fault. I was so afraid of my children being angry with me that I let them be angry with Sarah instead. And how did that feel for Sarah? Like I was throwing her under the bus to save myself. Is that what you were doing? David was quiet for a long time. Yes, he said finally. I was choosing my own comfort over my wife's well-being. The sessions continued weekly, each one peeling back another layer of the complex dynamics that had developed in their household. They talked about loyalty conflicts, about the difference between love and respect, about the way fear could make people act in ways that were opposite to what they really wanted. Sarah, Dr. Martinez said during their fourth session, what was the hardest part of the step-parent role for you? Sarah had been thinking about this question for weeks. The invisibility, she said finally. I was doing all the work of parenting but receiving none of the recognition. I felt like a ghost in my own home. Can you expand on that? I mean that my contributions were invisible until they were missing. No one noticed that I packed lunches every morning until the morning I didn't. No one appreciated that I managed everyone's schedules until the day I stopped. No one valued my authority until I wasn't there to exercise it. Emma started crying. Sarah, we did notice. I swear we noticed. We just didn't know how to say it. What held you back from saying it? Dr. Martinez asked. Emma wiped her eyes with the tissue box that Dr. Martinez kept strategically placed in the room. I think I thought that if I admitted how much I needed Sarah, it would make me vulnerable. Like, if I told her I loved her and appreciated her, then I would be giving her power to hurt me. And instead I hurt her first. Tyler nodded vigorously. Yeah, that's exactly what I did too. I was mean to her so she couldn't be mean to me. But Sarah wasn't being mean to you, David pointed out. I know that now. But when you're scared and angry, you don't always think clearly. Dr. Martinez looked around the room. What I'm hearing is that everyone in this family was operating from fear. Sarah was afraid of being taken for granted and dismissed. Emma and Tyler were afraid of loss and abandonment. David was afraid of conflict and rejection. They all nodded. And when people operate from fear, they often create the very outcomes they're trying to avoid. Sarah's fear of being dismissed led her to withdraw, which felt like abandonment to Emma and Tyler. Their fear of abandonment led them to reject Sarah, which pushed her toward actually leaving. David's fear of conflict led him to avoid addressing problems, which created bigger conflicts. So what do we do instead? Tyler asked. You operate from love instead of fear. You make choices based on what's best for the people you care about, not what feels safest for you in the moment. 12. The real breakthrough came during their sixth therapy session, when Dr. Martinez asked each family member to write a letter to their past self, giving advice about how to handle their family situation differently. Sarah's letter to herself was surprisingly gentle. Dear past Sarah, you're going to feel invisible and unappreciated, and those feelings are valid. But don't let those feelings make you invisible to yourself. Don't lose track of your own worth while you're trying to prove your worth to others. Set boundaries earlier. Ask for what you need clearly and directly. Don't assume that love should be effortless or that good relationships don't require maintenance and mutual effort. And remember that David chose you. He asked you to be part of his family because he saw something in you that he valued. Don't let the children's adjustment struggles make you forget that you bring something valuable to this family. Most importantly, remember that you can love someone and still require them to treat you with respect. Love doesn't mean accepting poor treatment. The relationship to insist on making it healthy. You're doing better than you think you are. Love, future Sarah. David's letter was more direct. Dear past David. Stop being a coward. Your children need you to be a parent, not a friend. Sarah needs you to be a partner, not a referee. When you avoid conflict with your children, you're not protecting them, you're failing them. You're teaching them that they don't have to be accountable for their behavior and that other people will absorb the consequences of their poor choices. When you fail to support Sarah, you're not keeping the peace, you're destroying your marriage. You're teaching your children that your wife doesn't deserve respect and that marriage doesn't require partnership. Your children have already survived one divorce. What they need from you now is not protection from accountability, but guidance toward becoming people others will want to be in relationship with. Step up. Be the father and husband your family needs. Love, future David. Emma's letter was the longest. Dear past Emma. You're scared and angry and hurt, and those feelings make sense. Your parents got divorced, your mom moved away, and now there's this new person in your life who seems to expect things from you. But here's what you don't understand yet. Sarah isn't trying to replace mom. She's trying to love you. And you're making that really hard for her. I know you think that being mean to Sarah will protect you from getting hurt if she leaves. But being mean to people who love you doesn't protect you, it pushes them away and makes you into someone who's hard to love. Sarah notices everything you think she doesn't notice. She knows your favorite coffee order and the way you like your eggs and which friends you're fighting with and when you're stressed about school. She pays attention to you because she cares about you. The least you can do is pay attention to her too. Ask her about her day. Say please and thank you. Help without being asked. Tell her when you appreciate something she does. These are small things that make a huge difference. And stop running to Dad every time Sarah sets a boundary. You know her rules are reasonable. You're just testing to see if she really has authority in this house. She does, and she should. Most importantly, stop being afraid to love her. She's not going anywhere, and loving her doesn't mean you love mom less. Your heart is big enough for both of them. Love, future Emma. Tyler's letter was shorter but just as insightful. Dear past Tyler. Sarah is not the enemy. I know you're mad about the divorce and you miss mom and everything feels different and scary. But Sarah didn't cause any of the bad stuff, and she's trying really hard to make things better. When she asks you to do chores or eat your vegetables or do your homework, she's not being mean. She's being a parent. That's what parents do, they care about your health and your future and your character. And when you're rude to her or ignore her or act like she doesn't matter, you're hurting someone who loves you. That's not okay, even when you're sad or angry. Try saying thank you sometimes. Try asking her how she's doing. Try helping without being asked. You might be surprised how good it feels to make someone happy instead of making them sad. Also, she makes really good cookies, and if you're nicer to her, she might teach you how to make them too. Love, future Tyler. When they finished reading their letters aloud, the room was quiet except for the sound of gentle crying. What do you notice about these letters? Dr. Martinez asked. We all knew what we were doing wrong, Emma said quietly. We just didn't know how to stop. Or we were too scared to stop, Tyler added. What's different now? Dr. Martinez asked. David spoke first. Now I know that my fear of conflict was creating bigger problems than the conflict itself would have created. Sarah nodded. And I know that I have the right to ask for respect and consideration. I don't have to earn love by accepting poor treatment. I know that pushing people away doesn't protect me, Emma said. It just makes me lonely. And I know that Sarah being a parent doesn't make her the enemy, Tyler concluded. It makes her someone who cares about me. Dr. Martinez smiled. It sounds like you've all learned to operate from love instead of fear. Epilogue. 1 year later. The house on Maple Street looked different now, though Sarah couldn't quite put her finger on what had changed. The furniture was the same, the walls were the same color, even the family photos in their silver frames remained unchanged. But there was something in the atmosphere, a lightness, a sense of peace that hadn't existed before. It was a Friday evening in November, almost exactly 1 year since the dinner that had changed everything. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing what had become their traditional weekly family dinner, everyone's favorite foods combined into one eclectic but delicious meal. Tyler's spaghetti and meatballs, Emma's garlic bread, David's Caesar salad, and Sarah's homemade chocolate chip cookies for dessert. The difference was that Sarah wasn't cooking alone. Emma was at the stove stirring the sauce, asking questions about seasoning and technique with genuine interest. Tyler was making the salad, carefully washing each lettuce leaf and arranging the croutons just the way his father liked them. David was setting the table with the good dishes, just as Sarah had done a year ago, but this time it was his idea. "Sarah, can you taste this sauce?" Emma asked. "I think it needs something, but I can't figure out what." Sarah moved to the stove, dipped a spoon into the rich red sauce, and considered. "Maybe a little more oregano? And sometimes I add a tiny bit of sugar to balance the acidity of the tomatoes." Emma nodded eagerly, making the adjustments. "You're such a good cook. Will you teach me to make your lasagna next week?" "I'd love to." Tyler looked up from his salad making. "Sarah, did you have a good day at work today?" The question still surprised Sarah sometimes, though Tyler had been asking regularly for months now. "I did, thanks for asking. We finally got approval for the campaign I've been working on for 3 months." "That's awesome," Emma said, turning from the stove. "Is it the one for the outdoor gear company?" Sarah felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. Emma had been listening when Sarah talked about her work projects, remembering details, showing genuine interest in Sarah's life outside their family. "That's the one. We're going to start filming the commercials next month. Can we see them when they're done?" Tyler asked. "Definitely." David appeared in the kitchen doorway, having finished with the table setting. "How can I help?" "Everything's almost ready," Sarah said. "Maybe just grab the garlic bread from the oven." "Already done. And I opened that bottle of wine you've been saving." They moved around the kitchen together with an ease that had developed over months of shared cooking responsibilities. No one was doing all the work while others watched. No one was feeling taken for granted or unappreciated. They functioned as a team, each person contributing according to their abilities and availability. As they sat down to dinner, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey they had traveled together. It hadn't been easy, there had been setbacks, moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, difficult conversations that stretched late into the night. But they had done the work, individually and together, to build something new. "Should we say grace?" David asked, as had become their custom. They joined hands around the table, and David offered a prayer of gratitude that felt genuine and heartfelt rather than perfunctory. "Thank you for this food, for this family, and for the lessons we've learned about love and respect and forgiveness. Thank you for second chances and for the courage to do better. Amen." "Amen," they echoed. As they began to eat, the conversation flowed naturally between school events, work projects, weekend plans, and the small joys and challenges of daily life. Emma talked about her college applications with excitement rather than stress, having learned that she could ask for help without appearing weak. Tyler described his latest soccer game with animated enthusiasm, making sure to include Sarah in his storytelling rather than directing all his attention to his father. "Sarah," Emma said as they cleared the dinner dishes together, "I have something to tell you." Sarah felt a familiar flutter of concern. Had old patterns reasserted themselves? Had she missed some sign of trouble? "I got into State University," Emma said, her face breaking into a huge grin. "Early admission." Sarah's heart soared with pride and excitement. "Emma, that's wonderful. Congratulations. And I wanted to ask you something," Emma continued, suddenly looking uncertain. "Would you help me move into the dorm next fall? Like, would you want to be part of that day?" The question hit Sarah like a physical embrace. For years, she had wondered if she would be included in the big moments of Emma and Tyler's lives, or if those milestones would be reserved for their biological parents. To be asked, to be wanted as part of such an important transition, felt like the ultimate recognition of her place in the family. "I would love to help you move into the dorm," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Good," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Because I'm going to need someone to cry with when I get homesick, and Mom's going to be too far away." Tyler looked up from loading the dishwasher. "Sarah, when I graduate from high school, will you be there?" "Try and stop me," Sarah replied, ruffling his hair in a gesture that had become natural and welcome between them. Later that evening, after the children had gone to their rooms and David was reading in his study, Sarah found herself back in the kitchen, wiping down counters that were already clean and reflecting on the transformation their family had undergone. The breaking point a year ago had felt like an ending, the collapse of her dreams for their blended family, the failure of her attempts to create belonging and connection. But it had actually been a beginning. The moment when they all stopped pretending that dysfunction was acceptable and started doing the hard work of building authentic relationships. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. Emma told me about State University. Thank you for being such a positive influence on her college planning. She's lucky to have you. Sarah smiled, thinking about how much her relationship with Jessica had also evolved over the past year. They would never be best friends, but they had developed a respectful co-parenting relationship based on their shared commitment to Emma and Tyler's well-being. David appeared in the kitchen, wrapping his arms around Sarah from behind as she stood at the sink. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured into her hair. "Just thinking about how different everything is now. Better different or worse different." Sarah leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Much, much better different. Any regrets?" Sarah considered the question seriously. The past year had required enormous emotional labor from all of them. There had been tears, difficult conversations, moments of doubt and frustration. The easy path would have been to continue the patterns they had established, with Sarah absorbing dysfunction rather than confronting it. "No regrets," she said finally. "Not about standing up for myself, not about requiring respect, not about insisting that we all do better. I'm proud of you," David said quietly. "And I'm ashamed that it took me so long to see what you were dealing with. We're all different people than we were a year ago. Are you happy, Sarah? Really, truly happy?" Sarah turned in his arms, looking into the face of the man she had married and nearly lost. "I'm happy, David. Not just happy to be included or happy to be appreciated, but happy to be myself in this family." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I don't have to choose between being loved and being respected anymore. I don't have to earn my place here every single day. I belong here, not because of what I do for everyone else, but because of who I am." David kissed her forehead. "You've always belonged here. I know that now. But more importantly, everyone else knows it too." As they turned off the kitchen lights and headed upstairs together, Sarah felt a deep sense of contentment. The house on Maple Street was finally the home she had dreamed of when she first said yes to David's proposal. Not because there was no conflict or challenge, but because there was love that was expressed through respect, care that was mutual, and belonging that was unquestioned. The blended family she had tried to force into existence through service and accommodation had finally emerged through honesty and healthy boundaries. It looked different than her original vision, but it was stronger and more authentic than anything she could have imagined. Emma's voice drifted down the hallway from her room, talking on the phone to a friend about college plans and future dreams. Tyler's light was still on, probably reading one of his comic books before bed. David was settling into his side of their bed, no longer collapsing from exhaustion but winding down from a satisfying day. And Sarah, for the first time in years, felt completely at home in her own life. The breaking point had become a breakthrough. The moment of seeming failure had become the foundation for genuine success. The woman who had once felt invisible in her own home now knew, without question, that she was seen, valued, and loved for exactly who she was. The stepmother who had once been afraid to stand up for herself had learned that love without respect wasn't love at all. And in teaching her family to treat her with dignity, she had given them all a gift that would serve them in every relationship for the rest of their lives. As Sarah drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the quiet sounds of her family settling in for the night, she smiled at the thought of how much had changed since that November dinner a year ago. The woman who had stood up from the table and changed the Wi-Fi password had been acting from desperation and pain. But she had also been acting from love for herself, love for her family, and love for the potential she saw in all of them to be better than they had been settling for. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept treatment that is less than loving. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is to expect them to rise to their best self, even when that requires them to face uncomfortable truths about their worst self. Sarah had given her family that gift, and they had given her the gift of rising to meet her expectations. The house on Maple Street was quiet now, filled with the peaceful breathing of a family that had learned to love each other well. And in the master bedroom, Sarah Mitchell fell asleep with a smile on her face, knowing that she had found her way home at last. Funny how fast "you're not my mom" turned into "please, can you be my mom again?" Actions have consequences, and they learned that the hard way. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories just like this. Thank you. The end.